Hi, everybody. My name's Eileen. I'm a compulsive eater. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day off the gray sheet, write them down, commit them to my sponsor. Don't eat in between no matter what, and abstinence is the most important thing in the world to me. My abstinence date is January 25th, 2015. I'm doing something that I've never done before, which is I'm reading my share. So anyway, I hope it doesn't lose anything in the translation. Service is something I believe in doing. We can give back to our fellowship in 2 ways, basically, with our time, energy, and talents, and with our money. And GSA needs all of that in order to continue to grow and thrive and help the next compulsive overeater. In Gray Sheet, I sponsor and am sponsored. I contribute to the 7th tradition at every meeting I go to, whether it's Zoom, a phone meeting, or face-to-face, and have been the GSR for our tiny face-to-face group since it started in Taos many years ago now. I can't underestimate the service of showing up at meetings regularly, for sharing your experience, strength, and hope with newcomers and people who have not yet found contented abstinence. This is crucial. But I found out the hard way that I needed more connection, a more substantial safety net. And for me, the best and most enjoyable way to create that is through service. I started doing Gray Sheet in 1995 and haven't eaten a bite of non-Gray Sheet food ever since. But I started counting days all over again because I failed to make a phone call in a dark, busy restaurant, sitting at a tiny table where I could barely read my scale, and they brought the food out in stages. I lost track of how many ounces of vegetables I had weighed, started eating them, and said, F it, when I thought to call my sponsor. It was late, I had not been in the habit of making phone calls, and my sponsor is 2 hours ahead of me on the East Coast. I told myself I didn't want to wake her up, but really I didn't want her to tell me to start over or to shame me for eating before my whole meal was weighed. Not that she had ever done that, but that's the only thing I could imagine her saying if I called. The next morning, I fessed up to her and started counting days again. Had I done the abstinent thing, called someone and did whatever they told me to do, I would have had 20 years that July 15th, but I didn't. I started over. Turns out it was the best thing that ever happened to my abstinence, even though my pride took quite a bruising. I had gotten abstinent in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where there were many meetings a week to go to. I was spoiled for my first 7 years when I could go to a meeting nearly every day of the week and often went to 4 or 5. I loved hearing people with more time than I had explaining how they handled family celebrations, work luncheon meetings, traveling, and just plain answering people who asked, "You're on a diet, but you're so thin." Just to hear them say, "I don't call it a diet. I never heard of a diet that lasts 20 years. Have you?" Or, "Yes, I bring my own food. I really like it better." Seems so bold, so full of confidence and chutzpah, and I wanted that. All I felt when people asked me about Gray Sheet was shame that I had to tote my scale everywhere and eat out of Tupperware containers. I thought people pitied me or that they could see the fat, compulsive eater that I used to be, and I hated that. I learned what to say and how to say it, what to do and how to do it, by attending lots of meetings. But in 2002, I moved to Taos, a very exciting and wonderful change for me in all ways but one. I was the only Gray Sheeter who lived there. The recovery community had known someone else who did Gray Sheet 20 years before I got there, but she had left people feeling scarred and scared of the word Gray Sheet. She moved to Mexico, and I never met her, but no one wanted to do what I did. Worse still, there was one recovering alcoholic who had tried Gray Sheet and was now a food writer for the local paper and ate every carb and legume in existence and warned other people to stay away from Gray Sheet if they showed any interest. I had a couple of close friends that I kept in touch with, every week on the phone with one Gray Sheet friend, but we had a falling out a few years later. I joined a writing group that I still belong to where 15 or so Gray Sheeters from all over write on the same topic once a week, every week, and that became my home group. I tried the phone bridge, but just like Taisia, I didn't know how to jump in and share, and the mute button was a mystery to me. And I realized I'd be on the phone meeting and my mind was going through my to-do list, or worse, balancing my checkbook. I stopped going to phone meetings before I ever really started or gave them a chance. In the beginning, living in an outpost, I went to any length. A GreySheeter in Denver and I met every other Sunday, halfway, a 2.5-hour drive each way for both of us. The closest face-to-face meeting was in Santa Fe, a 3-hour round trip away. And then that GreySheeter died. And the closest meeting was in Albuquerque, a 5-hour round trip away on Sunday mornings. And I worked playing music at my husband's church, so that wasn't possible. It was so hard to see a fellow GreySheeter back then. Several years ago, Laura L. moved to Taos, and we started a 2-person meeting that is still going strong, now with about 5 or 6. And that was a godsend, but it wasn't enough. After that day 1 happened, I realized that my current way of doing GreySheet was anorexic. I told myself I didn't need to be involved, that my sponsor and sponsee calls were enough. Isn't that what anorexics do, pretend they don't need anything? I started posting on the GreyNet and Facebook again, announcing my day counts. I had people pulling for me, and I could feel it. I went to 2 GreySheet retreats, one in Dallas and one in Malibu, and met lots of new people whose numbers I committed to my phone, and I used them. I learned that being a GSR meant having responsibilities like attending intergroup meetings and keeping my group informed of what was going on in the World Service level. So I started doing that. And I met some wonderful people. They were all about helping small face-to-face groups keep going. And I learned about what was going on at the World Service level. I learned that the Public Information Committee had put together all these things for us, like PSAs for local radio station things, and signs and information for the medical community, and all sorts of resources available on the website, which I had never been on. I joined a World Service Committee since GSRs are strongly encouraged to do that, and those too were on the phone. My committee was the Communication Committee, and still is, and they published Service Matters, our monthly newsletter. So I got involved in that slowly, just writing a piece or 2 every time we put one out. Our chairperson had to bow out, and that position was open, so after about a year, I became the chair. But I insisted on being a temporary interim position there because I was so sure there was someone more qualified to do this than I was. I have to say, at every stage, I always felt intimidated and that somehow my abstinence wasn't right or my service wasn't right. Let's face it, I just wasn't good enough. Low self-esteem had always been with me, so why wouldn't it be now? But fellow GreySheeters in service quickly told me that it wasn't true. When no one else stepped in to be chair, I took it on completely. And when the ISR position opened up, I was nominated for that and took it. That meant I could be financially supported to attend the World Service Conference. I'd always been kind of excited to go, but didn't have the money to get there or the time. Since I was working weekends and my home group was small, we could barely pay rent for our face-to-face meeting. Best of all, at my job, I discovered Zoom at work. I had heard about Skype meetings of GreySheet, but didn't know how to do that. And there were only a couple back then. I suggested Zoom to my Southern Serenity group that had been using Google Groups, which was kind of sketchy technically. Zoom meetings radically changed my experience because I could see people's faces. Week after week, we got to know each other. Before long, my intergroup and committee started meeting on Zoom, and that improved the way our groups connected with each other. I went to the World Service Conference in Chicago last September, a first for me. It was wonderful to arrive and see the other 50 people who'd been working hard in the last 3 years. I met most of them already on one Zoom meeting or another. We recognized each other that first day in the Senecal's lobby, and hugs were plentiful and sincere. I'm a writer, so working on Service Matters once a month is not a chore for me. Writing and editing come easily. I think it's a good idea to choose something that feels easy to you. Working with spreadsheets, for example, not one of my strengths, but it doesn't have to be. Someone else can do that. We have people working on improving the website, and there are people who know about how to do that. there's plenty of work to go around. And if you can show up, follow through, and are motivated and reliable, which we get when we're abstinent, right? We can use our own unique gifts and talents. And guess what? I started to feel better about myself because I was showing up and being accountable and doing esteemable things, including the first of staying abstinent. I had a lot of preconceptions about service work. Thank you, Kathy. And the people who got involved in service. Before this, I didn't even enjoy going to business meetings once a month at my home group and other fellowships. I always left feeling like I needed a meeting to counteract all the feelings that got stirred up in the business meeting. But GreySheet is different, and I'm different. It totally surprised me how much I enjoy doing service at the Intergroup and World Service level. The people I meet are wonderful. The work we do is important. I feel good about it, even when there are bumps in the road. Oh, and another quirk of mine, before meetings or when there are deadlines, I often feel overwhelmed, even a sense of dread about all that needs to be done or is just about to start. But that feeling subsides as soon as we get started. And when the meetings are over, there's a spring in my step and I'm humming. I catch myself feeling happy, joyous, and free after a service meeting. If I had only listened to my fear and dread, if I had quit my service positions, telling myself they were too stressful, I would have missed out on the miracle. I'm so glad I asked for help and continued to show up. We're a small fellowship, and we do what we do because it keeps us abstinent and it serves our worldwide fellowship. Look at all the people from all over the place on this meeting today. I have made wonderful friendships here. I'm not perfect, and I make mistakes with regularity. I had to get used to the idea of being a beginner and having to learn how to do every single job I've taken on. But help is available from people who have more experience than I have. Understanding and problem solving is readily offered when I've admitted to making mistakes. And my good ideas are always welcome, at least as a talking point. I don't quite understand why that is. It doesn't match up with my self-centered perspective that the more I give of my time, my money, anything really, the less I'll have. In GreySheet, the work we do is rewarded many times over. Yeah, sometimes there are personality issues, but we have the steps and a practice of looking at our own part, discussing it with someone, and letting it go. We learn how to surrender. When I think of all the blessings in my life brought to me by GreySheet, closeness to a higher power, freedom from the food so that I can be myself in the world and not have to apologize about that every day, I know I am blessed. Service has always been about strengthening my abstinence by giving me a sense of belonging in GreySheet. I didn't know all the other benefits I'd receive before I dove in. Whether it's being a reliable member of a group, making sure the room or the Zoom meeting is open when a newcomer gets there, or booking a speaker, or serving as treasurer and saving up money so your representative can get to the next World Service Conference, or being on a committee that interests you, I can tell you from my own experience, it's more than worth it. Thanks for listening. My name is Eileen, and I'm a grateful abstinent member of GreySheeters Anonymous.